Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome to episode 84 of the podcast. And today I'm going to chat about several different things. I want to tell you about an awesome experience I had over the last weekend teaching two little girls how to hand sew. That was a lot of fun. I also want to talk a lot about the Friendship Quilt-Along, which is starting on Thanksgiving Day, and kind of share my process because I am right now prepping things up so that way I can do some videos on how to piece half square triangles and how to piece our very first block. So that's what this episode's going to be about, kind of puttering around a little bit out here in the crafty cottage. Today was James's last day of school for Thanksgiving break. And so he is going to get off the bus and Josh and James are going to go get our Christmas tree. We always do this every year. We get our Christmas tree as early as possible and then the guys go get it. And we are probably going to do 2. We might do 3 trees. I don't know. We'll play that by ear. We've done, I think last year we did 3 trees. We don't have a lot of room in our house, but it's one of those things, it's just fun, you know? It's just fun to decorate and kind of go crazy. And I've collected all of these ornaments, and James kind of has his own style, and Josh kind of has his own style, and I have my own style. So when we each get to do our own tree, it really makes things interesting. I think last year I did a peppermint kind of themed tree, red and white. James's is usually kind of all over the place. Josh is usually kind of golds and browns, very, nothing glittery on Josh's tree. So that'll be a lot of fun. I don't know what they're going to be bringing home, but Josh said he wants to get a really, really big one. The last time we got a really, really big tree, it ended up sideways on our living room floor right after we had just redone the floors that fall actually. So I'm hoping it's not going to be too big. But what I started doing after that was kind of chaining it a little bit to the curtain rod. I just kind of run a wire from the top of the tree to the curtain rod. So hopefully we won't have another accident like that again. That was a disaster. We broke a lot of special ornaments and that was unfortunate. So yeah, looking forward to that in just a little while. And right now I'm trimming up half square triangles because you need about 1 million of them for block number 1. And yeah, it's just seemed like a really good thing to be taken care of while I chat with you about what's been going on. So I wanted to answer some questions about the new Friendship Quilt-Along because I already started getting lots and lots of questions about the Quilt-Along, how it works, how to get started, where to buy the patterns, all that kind of good stuff. So number 1, the link that you need to know and memorize is leahday.com/friendship. So right now that is an info page. I'm going to change that link so it's going to become the page where you buy your blocks and also find lots of information and all of the videos linked up in one place. So leahday.com/friendship. On Thanksgiving Day, you'll be able to come and pick up your pattern for block number 1 and that will get you started. And block number 1 is so much more than just block number 1. This is it right here. Josh just gave it back to me so that way I can do the finished kind of final edits. He went through it with a fine-tooth comb. And this came out at 52 pages long. It is a monster. It includes block 1. It includes all, piecing tips, all that good stuff, and how to get started walking foot quilting, free motion quilting, ruler foot quilting, and long arm quilting. Had a great time writing up all the information on all of that stuff. And then also includes all of your different quilt sizes. So you can make a crib, a throw, a twin, a queen, and a king. The difference between these is just how many blocks you make. So a king, you're going to need to make 2 of every block, but only 1 of the 13th block, the bonus block that will be included with block number 12. It's all in here. It all makes sense, I promise. It's really not overly complicated. I don't like to make things complicated. I try and keep it as simple as possible. We don't do any sort of registration or fees or anything like that. I'm always getting all of these questions around this time of the year just about extra fees and that kind of thing. And I don't know what these quilt shops are pulling, but we don't do that. You buy the pattern, you're signed up. And there's not really a sign up official. Just come and buy the patterns when they come out. New block patterns will be released on the 1st of every month. So Releasing this first one for Thanksgiving is really just for the Thanksgiving sale. And I will say the pattern is going to be at the best price during this time. So I hope that you'll come and check it out and take advantage of that. I mean, it's that time of the year. I figured it would be a good time to launch it. So yeah, it's going to be $4.99. So block 1, you can get started at $4.99 from Thanksgiving to Cyber Monday. After that, the price is going to go up to $9.99 because that pattern is huge. And that's why. So that's why the price is going to increase. I hope that you will come and take advantage of that. No discount codes. Everything's, it's going to be, you'll be able to see that it's already discounted. All block patterns after that. A lot of people get concerned about the price of a quilt along through all of the months of the year, and I totally get that. It can really add up really quick. So all of the future block patterns, so 2 through 12 plus the bonus 13th, those will all be $4.99 each. And yeah, at the end, I am planning on compiling everything into a book, but I have yet to do that with any of my other ones, so I can't promise when that will happen or when that will come out. But yeah, that's the plan. New patterns coming out on the 1st of every month, and then I'm also doing tutorials for these as well. So it's not like you just buy a pattern and kind of you're on your own. Like all of my quilt-alongs, I do a tutorial on how to piece it. That's going to come out on the 1st Monday of the month. And then I do a tutorial on how to quilt it on your home machine. That's going to be a tutorial on the 2nd Monday of the month. And then this is new for this year. I've never done this before. I'm going to do how to quilt on your long arm on the 3rd Monday of the month. And you don't have to have a long arm. Please don't feel like you have to have a long arm at all. You don't. I just really want to, honestly, it's a push for myself. It's pushing myself to try something new and try something different. I know that it will be ever so slightly faster, so it's not like it's going to push me to, it's not going to take me a lot of extra time to do that extra video. And the other added bonus is I have to make 2 of every block anyway because I'm making the king size version of the quilt. So it just kind of makes the most sense to me to go on ahead and quilt it 2 different ways on 2 very different types of machines. So I'm excited about that. I really am. I'm really looking forward to quilting the blocks on my long arm. I am already starting to realize that I need to have the long arm empty in order for that to happen. And yeah, I am probably going to speed quilt through the baby quilt I put on the machine 2 weeks ago and just set it aside. I was doing this was the last tutorial I did for Frame Quilting Friday. I skipped last week because we were going out of town. But it was basically ruler foot quilting to give those nice curves from corner to corner on 5-inch squares. Worked out really, really easy, but it's just turning out that I don't think I have time to really work on that quilt and do what I was wanting to do with it. So I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to go ahead and quilt through the rest of it and then set it aside for another day. And then what I'm thinking about doing, there's a lot of different ways I could put the blocks on the long arm. I could pin each one up, their backing fabric kind of side by side and do it that way. Or I could take one big wide piece of backing fabric and one big wide piece of batting and then put as many blocks across as I can fit. And I think that makes more sense. I think it'll be more stable. I have to get in there and play around. Honestly, I really, I'll be honest, have not had time. I have been working on that pattern pretty much 24/7 since we got back. We went to Charleston over the weekend and did Thanksgiving early. And yeah, I've been sitting on my computer. I have not been touching a machine. This is the first time I've gotten my hands on fabric all week, and I am super, super happy about that. So yeah, I need to take a look at that quilt that's on the long arm, possibly take it off and just say, I can tackle this again another day and try out this idea that I have with the blocks. Because I'm really wanting, if you kind of are getting like a little frantic vibe from me, there is a little franticness going on. I really want to get ahead. I feel really good when I'm ahead on any project. That is kind of my happy place. When I feel like, and I'm kind of breaking that down for myself really clearly, I have another project where I'm feeling behind, there is no deadline, but I am feeling personally behind on it, and that is affecting everything else about it. and it's not good. You know, it's making me feel like, it's making me feel bad about it. And I think that was part of why I started getting those emails. Like, I haven't started cutting up my squares yet. I'm behind on this quilt along. We haven't even started yet. Yeah, don't make yourself feel bad about that. You know, you can absolutely cut yardage too for this quilt along. You do not have to cut up 706 5-inch squares. And yes, that's the number that you need for the king size. When I did the math on that last night, I need to double check myself, but I did the math on all of the squares required for each block and kind of had a little bit of a, oh my gosh, that's a lot of squares. But you got to keep in mind, cutting 5-inch squares is slightly inefficient. You know, you can't cut as well as you can from yardage. So, you know, you kind of have to go into it with that mindset. Then also, you know, you could cut from charm packs, so you don't have to cut up your stash into a million pieces. I think that there's a 5-inch AccuQuilt Go die cutter. I'll have to check on that, but there might be. If not, then I know at Festival I saw where you could cut out multiple 1.5-inch squares and 2-inch squares, and I think 2.5-inch squares from different dies. So that's an option too. You know, so don't feel like you've got to cut up your whole stash into 5-inch squares immediately right the second before Thanksgiving, because that's, you know, crazy. You don't have to do that. It's taken Dad and I quite some time, and, you know, and we've made it just a process. It's just been something, you know, to kind of putter around on, you know, whenever there was, you know, we were in between stuff. It was like, oh, let's just cut up some more 5-inch squares, that kind of thing. I can say definitely ended up with lots and lots of packs, and we're doing 2 different sets. So, just in case you haven't been listening to the podcast, I'm going to be offering pre-cut packs. It's 30 squares, 35-inch pre-cut squares of my stash, fabrics that I have collected for years and years and years. And we're going to split them. We have 1 pack of batiks and we have 1 pack of prints. We are limiting this to 1 per customer, 1 or the other per customer. And the reason being, we just want people, you know, the maximum number of people to be able to enjoy this. And once they're gone, they're gone. There is no more. I have no more stash. There's nothing else left in there. I'm really looking forward to rebuilding my stash and figuring out what I want to put back, you know, in my fabric drawers. But I'm really enjoying just kind of not having tons and tons of fabric around. And, you know, it's changing my workflow just ever so slightly. So that's been really interesting. But yeah, it's just pre-cut packs. I'm calling those Leah's stash packs. And they will be available again on Thanksgiving Day too. So come and check those out. That'll be at leahday.com/stash if you want to check that out. Okay, so yeah, talking and trimming up half square triangles at the same time is a little on the tricky side. It would help if there were not ants crawling all over the place and ladybugs. I've got ladybugs out the wazoo. If a ladybug walks across the camera, I would not be surprised. You know, this is the downside. You know, there's so many upsides to having the Crafty Cottage. I have to be completely honest. I love it. I love it out here. I love it out here during this time of the year when it's cold outside and it's warm in here. That feels great. But the thing I don't love is the fact that this is partially in the woods, which means it is always partially full of bugs. And we have, you know, started to implement some measures. Like it was getting so over the top that we've had Orkin come out and spray. And then, you know, I've been a lot more vigilant. I don't bring any food out here at all, ever. I'm never snacking out here in the Crafty Cottage. But there's still ants. And the ladybugs are new. We've never had the ladybugs before, and then all of a sudden they've invaded this year. And I'm kind of allergic to ladybugs. If I like nudge one and it kind of does that spray action, that whatever that goo is that gets off on your hands, it causes my eyes, like I get welts around my eyes. Not pleasant, and it itches really bad. So I'm trying not to touch them, and I'm not liking that they are filling up the ceiling in the Crafty Cottage. So far they leave me alone. There's only been one that needed to dive bomb my head to make its presence known. Everybody else has been leaving me alone so far. Hopefully it will stay that way. Yeah, I am really excited about this quilt along. I gotta say, I really am. It's been a while since we did a year-long quilt-along. We did one in 2017 for the Flower Festival quilt. And, I try and change it up, do something different every year. And last year I did a series of mini quilt-alongs. We did quilts based off of the book, the Explore Walking Foot book, and that worked pretty good. I did the Eternal Love quilt-along, and then this fall we did Leaf Peepers with Sherry. So had a lot of like little mini quilts. But the thing that I picked up from that was sometimes, when we're in the middle of so many different projects, it's hard to go, okay, I'm going to drop everything and go start something big. Versus a month-by-month quilt-along like Friendship, it doesn't feel the same. Even though, I am making a king-size quilt, this feels like I'm making a king-size quilt, definitely. At the same time, because it's one block at a time, one per month, it doesn't feel quite so huge. And I know at the end of it, I'm going to love having that awesome king-size quilt on my bed. Now, one of the fun things that I've been playing with is new batting. So I have all of these batting samples. I pick up, different vendors and stuff whenever I've gone to market in the past and then different shows in the past too. This is Hobbs Midnight. And this is a black cotton polyester blend. This is an 80-20 blend. And I've heard so much about 80-20 blends. Like so many people absolutely love 80-20 blends. And I'll be honest, I've never made a quilt with one. Or at least not one that I was like, I know what's in it. And that's an 80-20 blend, and been able to form an opinion. Because, when you put mystery batting in a quilt, it's just like something in a bin and you just stick it in a quilt. You don't really learn anything from that. I'm doing black because my background fabric for my Friendship blocks is black. And I just figured that was a good idea. So that way I wouldn't have, any chance of white batting pulling through. Not that that's ever been really a problem. I think bearding where the batting pulls through to the wrong side or the right side, I blame that on two things. The first, I have had one situation where a batting started to beard and it was due to a dull needle. It really was. It was straight up the dull needle was pulling the batting to the back side of the quilt, and it just got awful. I mean, it was to the point of I am ready to throw this thing in the trash. It is so bad. But thankfully, I stopped myself before I did, and I put a false back on it. I just put another piece of fabric over it, and then changed my needle, and then I realized what was going on. So sometimes it can be the needle that you're using. It's not necessarily the batting. And that's the thing. The other time that I have experienced batting kind of pulling through, and you see these like strings, these long strings of the batting just starting to pull through to the wrong side or the right side of the quilt. The only other time that's happened is because of the fabric. So once or twice I've ended up with some kind of sketchy pre-cuts. I've made a quilt out of it. And then in those areas, here's the reason why I know it's not the batting. Because the batting is only pulling out over certain fabrics. That is what tells you everything. I even have a king-size quilt where I think, and this one was another quilt as you go kind of thing. I was just trying out some really big designs and playing. This was several years ago. I think I got the quilt, the top fabric, which was kind of a red fabric color, is just a red solid. I'm pretty sure I got that from the discount bin, just trying to save some cash. And the back was some nice 108-inch wide batik that I cut down into squares. Well, there is no batting, there is no bearding, there is no puffballs, there is no nothing happening to the batik side, the back side. There is all kinds of crazy happening on the red side. So that tells me it is not the batting. The batting is not the guilty culprit here. He's not the guilty party. It is everything to do with the fabric, and you've got to use good quality fabrics. Yeah, that is absolutely essential. I think it's just something about the weave, maybe, just kind of letting things through a little bit too much. I don't know. It's why I tend towards batiks. Batiks are just so much, they're just denser woven, but they're also thinner. It was really interesting. What Dad was, he spread out all of the batiks over the table, and the stacks were really thin. I was like, wow, I feel like I use batik a lot more than prints and solids. I guess the difference is I would buy a lot of prints and solids, and then it would just set my shelf. I wouldn't use it. I wouldn't actually put it to good use. And he said, no, there's actually the same amount there. It's just thinner. You know, it's just a much thinner weave, and that means that it's not going to come out and stack up as high as the other ones. So I found that really to be cool. That was really neat. That was eye-opening. He was piecing some of these half square triangles for me, and I took a look at this. I was like, Dad, it's got like 3 layers, this half square triangle. He accidentally grabbed 2 pieces of the black background fabric before he sent it through the machine, and it is hard to see. I mean, the black background with black thread, it can get really tough. So I was like, I'll take that out to the Crafty Cottage and rip it for you. No big deal. So yeah, just tear it out and do it over again. It was funny though, because we're kind of, pattern testing, making sure the math is right, the whole 9 yards. And it's like, oh man, Dad, you're going to have to start all over again from scratch. The math is off now. No, just kidding. I can rip this out. We're fine. Yeah. I actually had somebody ask last week, what do I mean when I say, Dad helped me piece the blocks, or Dad helped me with this. My dad works for me. And, he comes in at 9 o'clock every day and gets off about 3:30, and he comes in and does fabric prep. He can piece pretty much as good as I can now. He's had a lot of one-on-one tutorials with me, and then he does a little bit of quilting, not so much. I had, before I had the long arm, I had a whole machine set up in my little sewing room, and Dad did some walking foot quilting. He helped me out in a lot of the quilts that we did for the walking foot book, and was really helpful with that. But then when I got the long arm, we switched out and basically collapsed that setup and have the long arm in that same room. So it doesn't do as much quilting anymore, but definitely piecing. And then I have 4 quilts to bind. Yeah, Dad's going to be doing the binding. I pretty much decided that that's something I can delegate. Binding is fun. I mean, don't get me wrong. Binding is fun. I don't resent it. It's just not my favorite. And, and I look at it as like, okay, well, I could spend, half a day binding a quilt, or I can spend half a day working on a pattern, and that pattern needs to get done. So I work on, it's really been a big priorities thing. And I apologize for not sharing more videos. I realized, Josh was like, wow, what's been going on? He was just kind of looking at the traffic on the site, and it's been dropping a little bit. And I said, well, I haven't posted anything because I've been working on this pattern. I haven't, I've decided to prioritize only that, and to give myself permission to just say I can't do anything else. And honestly, that was a relief, but I still have this kind of guilty conscience thing going on. Like, oh man, I really need to do some videos. And I make myself feel bad about it, but then I'm like, no, the biggest thing is this thing, and getting it done and getting this pattern ready to go. And it was a lot of work. And like I said, I still have a little bit of work to do on it, and getting everything polished up and just absolutely perfect for Thanksgiving Day. And, it is a trade-off. It's always a trade-off. It is choosing to do one thing and saying yes to that means saying no to something else. And I'm really trying to make that very clear in my head from here on out, because it's so easy to overcommit, to different projects. It's so easy to be like, oh, I want to do this and that and the other thing. And, it's just not possible. It really isn't. There's so many different things that I would love to spend more time working on. I'd love to do more machine embroidery. I would love to do, more stuff with spoonflower and spoonflower fabric panels and stuff like that. But, it is a lot of those things I'm slow at. That's a lot of the problem, is I haven't figured out ways of speeding up and being efficient. And so that means it's even more time consuming to learn it, figure things out from the ground up. And learning something new is always more time consuming than, doing something that you know how to do already. And that's why, making this pattern was just a little bit more, it was just a little bit more time consuming than it would have been, because I was using Adobe InDesign. This was the first really, when I say it's a book, it looks like a book to me at least. And this was my first time really laying out something this substantial. I laid out the Miss Bunny pattern in InDesign, and this has been the most substantial thing that I've laid out in that program. And you know, for years I resisted getting into the Adobe programs, and I'm quite honestly, I'm a little upset with myself even now that I did that. I learned Microsoft Publisher, which is not a very robust program, you know, and honestly, it was slowing me down and I didn't even know it. Had I learned Illustrator and InDesign years ago, I would be so much faster now. But, you know, I just wasn't willing to bite the bullet and learn a more complicated software. More than anything else, it was just time. So yeah, it feels good though. I have to say, it feels good. And if I do turn this pattern, the set, into a book, I'll be that much faster because it'll already be in the program that I need for the book. I'll have to redo the layout completely and redo the margins, and I don't even want to think about how complicated that will be. But yeah, you get the idea. It's been good, and a little time consuming, a little slow, just on the, you know, if something messes up and, you know, something kind of, I was having this weird issue where I would do a caption and then all of a sudden it would disappear. I was trying to figure out, why is this happening? You know, just like little things like that, where I wasn't an issue with another program, but Adobe InDesign has like 17 million extra features that can kind of get in your way just a little bit. I have also had to, just this past week, learn a new video editing software as well. So getting that, you know, it's time to learn new things, you know, take on, you know, my word for the year is challenge. It has been a challenge. It's good. Adobe Premiere is the video editing software. And I subscribe to, it's called Adobe CC, Adobe Creative Cloud. I basically do the monthly subscription where I get all of they're called apps now. They're all standalone software, but they're now set up as apps on your computer. You can also set them up as apps on your phone, although I can tell you, they're not the same program on your phone as on the computer. It's just not as robust. You know, it's sometimes nice to have the portability, but it's not the same program. So Adobe Premiere is the Adobe video editing software. I sometimes feel like, wow, this is like 17 million times more complicated than it has to be. But if you have, you know, I'm trying to keep it in mind that people are making actual movies like for the big screen with this program. So it's understandable why it would be that complicated and have the millions and millions of features that it has. It's just a little bit annoying on the learning side of it. It's just a little frustrating. But, you know, you probably haven't noticed a change. It was about a week ago or so, and all of the videos that I started sharing have since been done through Adobe Premiere. And if I seem a little distracted, it's because there's like lizards now moving into the Crafty Cottage too. I had one the other day that I unfortunately consigned to a miserable, horrible death. Accidentally, I didn't mean to kill him. I turned on my bug light and forgot that he was in here. And of course, a lizard, nice warm light, went for the bug light and then got stuck to the sticky paper. This guy, I've got another one in here now. I think they're coming in through my air conditioner. I need to either, I don't know, figure out a way of sealing it up. It's just sometimes it gets so hot in here, even in the wintertime, I will turn on the AC just for a minute or two just to cool it down a little bit. So last year I left the AC in here the whole winter and it wasn't a problem, and I had one little lizard that showed up. But now I've had 2 in 2 days, so it might be a problem. Yeah, he's looking at me. Go on, go on. It's like, of all the distracting things, when something like critter like crawls across, you know, the front of you as you're trying to talk and cut something and think about what you're saying next, that's pretty distracting. Yes, that's pretty distracting. Okay, so what else happened this week? Yeah, I think I should tell you about the trip to Charleston. That was a lot of fun. Went to my sister's house and made Thanksgiving dinner on Saturday. And that was made just a little bit more complicated because I was at the same time teaching a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old how to sew. So this was it was fun. What it was is a neighbor kid came over and was staying. And then my niece, and we'll call her A, she was just hanging out with me, and I had brought a box of hexagons, of English paper pieced hexagons that I'd had, stashed away for years since I did the Express Your Love quilt along. And these hexagons, I had started a version of Express Your Love with it was the 1/4 inch hexagons. I did those for her face, and then I wised up and decided to do bigger ones for her body and her arm, but then basically run out of time and set the whole thing aside. Well, I grabbed that bin before we left for Charleston. I was like, oh, this will be just something fun to putter around with, in between doing the turkey stuff, doing the, decorating stuff, all that, Thanksgiving goodness. So I had this bin, and I had honestly not gone through it in years. I had no idea what I carried with me. All I knew is that it had some hexagons in it and some fabric, and I checked that it had a pair of scissors, and that was about it. I did not double and triple check that I had everything I needed. So I just end up in this situation where I'm sitting at the kitchen table with my cup of coffee, piecing. A little girl comes in, Amelia A comes in, and she's like, we're going to learn how to piece, right? We're going to learn how to sew. And I'm sitting there with a 3/4 inch hexagon in my hand going, I don't know what I just signed up for, but yeah. And it was, there was a really good book that I've been reading, and I don't like the title of it at all. It's Unf Yourself. Not, in my opinion, the best title in the world. It is a good book, and it focuses in on kind of positive words, positive phrases that will really help you identify what you want to work on and the direction you want to go in, and, identifying those situations that can sometimes just hop in your path, like this one, where you have an opportunity, you have a million different decisions that you could make. I could have said no. I could have shut it down. I could have put my box of stuff away. I could have said, go play. I'm working on these hexagons. Any number of those things could have happened. But the phrase that I tapped into was, am I willing? And that's from that book. But basically, am I willing? And willingness is so much better to ask yourself if you're willing. I don't know. In my opinion, that question just really cuts through all of the noise, and it helps you identify kind of a deeper feeling inside yourself. Like, I'm tired, I've got all of this stuff to do today, there's all this going on, and if you're staying on the surface of all those details, you might miss your kind of deeper goals that are in there. But sometimes you have to tap into it and ask, are you willing to go that extra mile? Are you willing to take the time and energy and effort to teach these little girls how to sew? And almost instantly it was like, yeah, this is the whole reason why I wrote Mally the Maker. I want to teach little girls how to sew. I want to inspire little girls and kids in general. I want to inspire kids to make things with their hands, because there is only so far a tablet or a computer game or a cell phone is going to get you. You have got to have some skill with your hands. And so here I had this opportunity to teach 2 little girls how to sew. I took it, and pawed through that box. First off, I was just like, I don't know what I've got. I don't know if I have something I can teach you, because English paper piecing hexagons just did not seem like a good fit. They were very much in, just having a threaded needle, tying knots, it needed to be very, very basic. And for that reason, I was really happy I did not have a sewing machine. I'm glad I didn't have a sewing machine, because I think teaching sewing from a sewing machine is actually not a good idea, because instantly they're getting, perfect stitches. Instantly if they're stitching straight, then they're stitching straight lines. I think a lot of that really needs to come, understanding can come from hand sewing first. So I pawed through my box, just happened to have 3 sewing needles, which I didn't even know I had. So I had one for me, one for A, and one for the neighborhood girl. We'll call her C. Yeah. I'm just being a little bit careful on names. You never know who's listening to a video or whatever. So yeah, that's all. So I handed them needles. I rooted around and I found I had some scraps of red fabric that were not what I was doing, because I kind of was almost out of the fabric that I was using for the goddess quilt, so I didn't want to use that. But I happened to have some scraps of red, which I don't even remember why they were in the box. And then I had a significant amount of another batik that I'd stashed in there, thinking it was similar enough to the goddess fabric that I could use it in a pinch. So I had enough fabric. I had the stuff I needed. I had some needles. I had a pair of scissors. You know, I didn't have a rotary cutter. I didn't have a ruler. I didn't have any of my normal stuff, but I didn't really need it. I rough cut out some squares. They were accurate enough. I mean, did it piece up, you know, a perfect 7-inch square or 5-inch square? No. It was whatever I basically had a strip of cut fabric. I folded it on the diagonal and cut rough squares, and just said that was good enough. So I gave them 2 red squares and 2 batik squares and just showed them how to start piecing. And it was as simple as they each got 1 needle, they each got 1 pin to hold the fabrics together. They stuck themselves. They bled a little bit. It wasn't that big of a deal. I really did not take the needle away from them, or at least I tried not to. You know, occasionally they would come to me. We were sitting at the kitchen table for a little while, and then they would run off and play, and then they'd come back, and then they'd run off and play and come back. And they, you know, sometimes they would come to me and be like, oh, what do I do with this? You know, the pin was kind of getting too close to where they were stitching and that kind of thing. And so I'd, you know, show them how to move it, and I'd encourage them to start doing it themselves. So almost immediately I was showing them how to do things, but then giving them the ability to do it themselves rather than needing to come back to me and check and check and check. I think fostering independence more than anything else. If you've tried teaching your kids how to sew, most likely the frustration and the friction, at least what I've identified so far, because I've tried teaching James how to sew and we struggled. We struggled with each other. And some of that, I think, is like your own kid can drive you more crazy than somebody else's kid. So there could be a little bit of that. But there can also be, you know, just that level of expectation of, you know, you're going into it expecting, not necessarily, I don't think anyone goes into it expecting perfection, but just maybe expecting more patience from your child than you're getting, expecting better looking stitches, expecting, you know, more knowledge of how everything works. Any expectation, this is another thing from that book that I've really enjoyed. Any expectation is dangerous, because any expectation signs you up for disappointment. Because if you are expecting something and then getting something different, then you're going to be disappointed with the results. And so one of the phrases that the author advised is expect nothing except everything. I really love that concept, you know, expect nothing. And I kind of went into it like, we're going to piece this theme and we're going to see what happens. If they want to keep on going, we'll keep on going. I cut out 4 squares. We're going to make a 4-patch. You know, I included the tutorial for a 4-patch at the end of Mally the Maker. And, you know, and that was my intention, you know, to encourage kids to just do basic patchwork. And I just thought, you know, well, we'll just see. You know, if they can manage to get through, you know, piecing 2 sets together, then we'll see if they can handle the long seam. Everything, I went into everything with that project with no expectation whether they would finish it or not finish it. It was just, you know, I'd tie off a thread, I'd show them a back stitch, I'd show them how to move their needle, but there was I had nothing writing on it. A lot of times I'd hand it back to them and then go work on the turkey or stuffing or something, you know. So, you know, I tried more than anything else to foster independence for these girls, and that really worked out well. I think they really appreciated that, not having it constantly taken away from them. And then, you know, when they, like I said, they got stuck with the pen or the needle, maybe twice did it actually draw blood. And my sister is a nurse. She kind of shuddered. I said, oh, just squeeze it so it bleeds a little bit and then suck on it. You know, because your saliva will cause your blood to coagulate, you know, and clot. And Mary was like, germs, germs. You know? She pulled out some antibacterial spray and set it on the table. But I think by that stage, we'd already gotten past all the finger pricks. You know, that was already over. So, you know, yeah, if you've got a particularly clumsy kid, I don't think more than 1 or 2 finger pokes is, you know, going to kill them. And it's certainly not going to, I don't think it's going to be something that's continual. If they continue to make themselves bleed, there's something else going on. Maybe they're not doing it right. Maybe they're not understanding the stitch. There can be any number of things. And just in case you are wanting to maybe take this on and try a 4-patch with a kid over Thanksgiving, I already have a tutorial on this. You can check it out at mallythemaker.com/4patch. So if you lose your patience, you can always turn on the video and I will take over for you. So yeah, that was fun. What we ended up doing, they stuck with it and they were rock stars. Those girls were really, really awesome. So they stuck with it and basically carried their squares along with them whenever they would go and play, but then they come back to it. And then eventually they wandered off to the craft area and just kind of hung out there. I was busy with dinner and helping out with that stuff, so I couldn't really follow them. They started then bringing me the squares only when they had a problem. And it was not even once an hour. You know, they're very, very independent. And then at the very end, they were like, well, you know, a 4-patch square, you know, there's not really much you can do with that unfinished. You know, it's not necessary. It's not really something that you can play with without it eventually falling apart. And so I knew I had enough fabric and I'd kind of been eyeing it and thinking maybe we could turn these into pillows. Maybe. If they have enough patience, if they're really sticking with it, maybe we'll turn this into a pillow. So they stuck with it and then we're still chomping at the bit to keep on going. So I cut out, you know, just a solid fabric square for the back. And I should add that I was marking their seam allowance. I just took a ruler and measured 1/4 inch inside the edge of the squares, and so they had a marked line to stitch on. I think that's really, really important. It really is. Visually, it just really worked for them to be able to stitch on a line versus stitching just, you know, on the edge. I can remember being a kid and not having a line to stitch on, and I was just all over the place, up and down, and even with the line, I started stitching vertical stitches. And I made her pick them out. I wasn't super picky, I really wasn't, but I did make her pick those out because she started a pattern of them. And it was, something's going on here. It was the way she was holding it. It was her angle. She was getting in a hurry. She was rushing. So I slowed her down, showed her how to do it properly, picked out those stitches, got her started again. And then she didn't make the same mistake again. So, you know, I don't think being overly picky is a good idea, but I don't think letting stitches go that are just flat out wrong is a good idea either, because you don't want vertical stitches. It's just not right. It was just not right. And I got her started again and on the right track where she understood the mistake that she'd made and then wasn't making that mistake again. So yeah, did the pillow, basically placed the other piece on top, drew seam allowance around the whole thing. I drew a start and end point so I could leave some space open so the pillow could be turned right side out. And then away they went, really. The only downside with that was it was a very long seam. So rather than have a super, super long thread, which I knew they would get in trouble with, I cut short threads so they would have to come back to me and check in and get a new thread cut. And I just left the thread and a pair of scissors on the high counter in the kitchen. And so whenever they check in with me, I just cut another piece and, you know, keep on working on dinner and making the gravy and all that kind of stuff. It was fine. It worked out great. It really, really did. They, at the very end, so we ate dinner, they went back to stitching. At the very end, they finished their pillows and turned it right side out. But then I didn't have anything to stuff them with. I was like, "Aw." You know, they were such rock stars, and they stitched all the way around. They stitched the 4 patches. They stitched all the way around it, which was a very, very long seam, and they stuck with it. And then, didn't have anything to fill it with. And I thought about it and thought about it. I asked my sister if she would sacrifice a pillow. She wasn't willing to cut open one of her, good bed pillows. And then I remembered that we had some neck pillows out in the car. And I had just happened to be I had been using one in the car on the way down for the trip. And I just randomly unzipped it just to check out what was on the inside. And it was kind of a dark brown fiberfill. I'm not even sure what it is. It looked like a polyester fiberfill to me, but it was more kind of a hairy texture. Yeah, I just decided let's just use some fiber out of that, and pulled out a couple handfuls and showed the girls how to stuff their pillows. I did the finishing stitch where you stitch, basically from one side to the other. I did that myself. I wouldn't let them do that simply because I wanted to make sure that edge was really, really secure. And I promised I'd teach them that, some other time. But yeah, finished up the pillows and they were so delighted. Really. I mean, how thrilled these kids were when they have probably rooms full of stuffed animals, purchased, gifted stuffed animals. But here, this pillow, this 4-patch pillow they made themselves, that was, about this big, finished, it just made them so happy. And it made me happy. I mean, it was exhausting. I will not kid you. It was not glorious rainbows the entire time. There were a few times that I, just had to kind of do a little bit of gritting my teeth and bearing it, and then also checking in on what is my intention and am I willing to keep going with this? Am I willing to keep working at this? And there were a few times that I had to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't help you right now. I will be with you in just a minute, and set some boundaries too. So it's not all saying yes, yes, yes. It's not all, being a slave to the moment. It is in tapping into that, am I willing? And then everything else seems to kind of fall in place after that. And the only times that I wasn't willing is when there were just too many things pulling my attention that needed to be taken care of in order for dinner to be a success. And then as soon as that was over, then I went back to the girls and helped them out again. Yeah, it was good. It was really good. It certainly gave me a lot of more perspective on teaching children. It certainly made me want to do some sort of like take and teach, more of kind of like a pop-in, pop-out kind of workshop designed for kids. I don't think that kids work really well with an intensive, long, drawn-out kind of thing. I mean, those girls would stitch for a little bit and then they would go play. Like they had a gymnastics bar that A's dad built, and she'd go out there and flip around on it a little bit and throw herself on the gymnastic mat that she had outside a bit, and then come back to stitching. I mean, she needed to be physical in order to be able to sit still and stitch. So I'm not sure that stitching for an hour on end, without breaks, without stopping, is anything realistic for teaching children. And I think it should be something that's more incorporated with, here's some friends over, they're all doing this stuff, check in and hang out and stitch for a little bit, and then go out and play for a little bit, and then come back in and stitch for a little bit, and let it be flexible that way. I think in past, especially when I have tried to sew with James, I think there's been a little bit more of a, like, we need to get this project done. Like, we need to go from A to B. We need to have all of the stuff stitched. And it's been too much. It's been too much to chew. And I've had too much expectation built up with it. And that's why I have not been successful teaching James. It's really interesting. It really is. When I kind of take myself out of the equation and step back and observe the amount that you can learn from kids is really cool. It really, really is. So yeah, I had a great time and I learned a lot, and I taught 2 girls how to make a 4-patch, and they made a pillow, and I hope they keep it. And I think that they will, and it was interesting to see the skill level. The younger girl, who was 6, she actually could make a better stitch than the older girl who was 7. And so some of that I can say is innate talent in a way. It's not necessarily, you know, and I don't really believe in like inborn talent. I believe that everyone has the ability to build skill, and that only by repetition and practice do we build skill. But there is still that little bit of something that, you know, that makes one person a little bit more interested, and that little bit of interest might have resulted in she's gotten a few more times sitting down and stitching with other people. And that has already, at 6, started to have an effect on the dexterity and detail of her fingers and her skill with her fingers. All it is finger skill. Really is. So I don't know, you know, it was definitely something interesting. And I think there was definitely, with the 7-year-old, a little bit of rushing, a little bit of rushing going on, you know, and that's just the level of patience and emphasizing patience more than anything else. That was, you know, something I was not like beating it to death, but I was saying it a lot, you know, just like stay patient, stick with it. You know, it's not a race. You're not, you know, I was really making sure that they weren't trying to compete with one another. Don't want that. You don't want a competition between the two. If anything, I actually reinforced competition to tiny stitches. I said, okay, I'm going to judge who has the tiniest stitches at the end, and whoever has the tiniest stitches wins a prize. It was really funny because I didn't really have a prize to give them. I know, guilty. But what I realized I did kind of sort of had a prize for them, and I gave a little bit to both of them. I gave them a strip of super wide 2.5 inch, yeah, it was 2.5 inch wide lace, and I gave them a nice size strip of it. I know if I had been 6 or 7, that would have been like, the most amazing thing ever, you know, because you just don't see stuff like that, and certainly don't get any of it, you know, don't get to play with it, don't get to own it when you're that young. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool, and I did give both of them a little piece, just because, you know, even though the 7-year-old stitches were a little bit bigger than the 6-year-old stitches, I just decided, you know, they both need the reinforcing of aiming towards smaller stitches, taking their time, going slow, but also making it fun, you know, more than anything else. So yeah, it was good. It was good fun. You know, it'll be interesting to see where that goes as far as, you know, I've already been thinking about other small projects that would be really easy to have cut out. I think the key, gotta have cutting already taken care of. Cutting is the hard thing, you know. Not only, you know, scissors is one thing, but cutting out, like, let's say if we wanted to make a quilt top, cutting out even 25 squares, even large squares, it's time consuming. And honestly, that's the reason why I never mastered patchwork, never mastered quilting as a young kid, because the time involved cutting, just, it always sapped the energy right out of me. I would maybe cut like 10 hexagons by hand with a pair of scissors, and then I'd be like, I can't do this, you know, and I'd give it up, you know, I'd just give it up. So yeah, that was lots and lots of fun. I had a great time, and I can't wait to keep teaching more kids about sewing. I need to think through, you know, kind of all of those projects that I made for my original Miss Bunny doll. I remember I'd make her pillows, I would make her blankets, and kind of made her up a bed, that kind of thing. So I'm kind of thinking along those lines, you know, fun little projects that would be good accents for Miss Bunny, but completely hand sewing based. And I'm thinking getting into felt for that too. Felt doesn't require, you know, a finished edge. It's not going to fray. It's not going to unravel. It's cheap. It's readily available. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you have ever taught a kid in your life successfully or had a fun project that you've sewn with another kid, and then if you have any perspective on, you know, what was the first project that you learned how to sew, who taught you, you know, was it just that one-on-one, or was there a lot of other things going on? I think an apron might be a fun project. I know that was Nancy Zeman. I think Nancy Zeman's first project was an apron that she sewed. I think a needle case, you know, something small, just a little needle case, you know, being able to stitch and sew around it and then have a button and maybe a loop closure, that would be really cool. So yeah, this has given me so many different ideas, and just really tapping into that idea. Am I willing? Am I willing to take this time? Am I willing to be a little distracted? Am I willing to be interrupted a lot today? Am I willing to put my needs and wants aside for this greater pursuit? And the answer was yes. You know, it may not have been yes continually throughout the day as I was making dinner, but it was definitely yes in my core. I wanted to do that. I wanted to have a positive influence on these girls because that is how I learned. It was not necessarily like my grandma, my mom, it was my great aunts. They would come to visit, and it was then a novelty because, you know, they were not there all the time. They lived in Texas. They would drive in. And so they would come in very rarely, once in a blue moon, and then here are these little girls, and here's this little girl that's interested. Oh, I'll sit down and show her something. And that's how that worked. And because then they were vacationing, they had all the time in the world to sit and show me something. There was a woman at my church. Her name was Juanita. I still remember her name, even though that was at least 25 years ago, the last time I saw her. And she had so many wonderful craft projects that she taught me. So these influences that we can have in these kids' lives, they might not be our kids. You know, actually, I would say more rare, more likely they're not our kids. And taking advantage of that influence and being able to pass even something as small as just how to sew a straight seam on fabric and tie a knot in it. I think that, you know, be happy with that. You know, be happy with the smallest thing that you can pass on. And then if they want more, give them more. Absolutely. Yay, I got all my half square triangles cut. Yes, there are quite a few for block 1. Let me grab block 1, I'll show it to you. Yeah, I still have all of my blocks out here from photographing them last week, but there is our block 1 pattern available Thanksgiving Day. And like I said, I have decided to do midnight batting, and I'm using up all of my orange fabric. I'm probably going to need to go buy more. I have all of the solid orange yardage, and I'm going to cut it up and piece it to make the backing. So this is a major stash buster, guys. I mean, if you have lots and lots of scraps, if you have lots of yardage that you just like to see the end of it, you know, like, let's just get it out of here, get it out of here. You know, fabric that's too pretty to cut. You need a big 25-inch piece of backing fabric. So if you took all of your fabrics that were too pretty to cut and you use those as backing, that would make a gorgeous quilt that would be pretty on both sides, right? So I really hope that you'll join in the fun and come and pick up block number 1. You can find it at leahday.com/friendship. And this is going to be a quilt along. We are going to be quilting along through every month of 2019, making 1 block per month quilted on a home machine. And then I'm going to do the extra block quilted on my long arm because I am making the king-sized version of the quilt. So that's another thing. Don't forget, you can make any size that you want. So if you have a queen-size bed, a twin, if you really need lots of crib quilts, baby quilts, then this is going to be the project for you. I hope that you'll join in the fun. So come and check it out at leahday.com/friendship. Until next time, let's go quilt.